Hey everyone, Patrick Gargano here from Learning and Certifications.
And along with Hank Preston, also from Learning and Certifications. And as promised, we're back to talk about the domains that make up the CCNA certification. And we're going to start out with
Domain 1.
Great place to start out. Domain 1 is called Network Fundamentals. And as the entry point for Cisco certifications, it really is an important domain to dive into. Now, fundamentals is a pretty big thing.
It's big.
If we look at it, and hopefully you're looking at the blueprint as can we talk through this, right? There are 13 tasks involved, and it can feel a bit overwhelming, but we don't want you to be overwhelmed, right? What's something to consider as people are looking at the fundamentals domain?
Listen, it's the basics, right? So how does the network operate? What are the devices in the network, and how do they come together to create that network, forwarding traffic throughout the network? So like as Hank is saying, it's a big domain. It's worth 20% of the exam. And what I mean by that is you can expect in the questions that you get on the CCNA exam, about 20% of them will come from this domain in particular. And there's a couple of areas that can be a little challenging here for folks that are new to networking. And I think the one that jumps out when I look at the list is the subnetting one, the IPv4, IPv6, and all the subnetting around that.
Yeah, I mean, subnetting is an important skill for every network engineer, and that's why it shows up at the CCNA level. Now, there's not a ton of math involved in being a network engineer, but one of the key elements that you do have to understand is what binary is all about and how binary fits into IP addressing.
Yeah.
And so you're going to have to spend a little bit of time learning how IP addressing works, learning what 8 bits mean and how to convert IP addresses from binary to decimal, and then do those comparisons. So expect to spend a pretty significant amount of time becoming comfortable with that if that type of math is new for you.
And if this is the first time you're looking at this blueprint, you might be wondering, are there some specific words that are being used for a reason in the blueprint? I think it's important that we take a couple of minutes to talk about that. So if you look at the verbs that we're using throughout the blueprint, not just in domain 1, you'll see things like explain and describe, and then suddenly it becomes identify or configure. And I think it's important just to wrap our minds around what those differences are.
We spend a lot of time specifically selecting the verbs to go along with each of the tasks because they provide input, not just for us, but for you to understand how deep of knowledge you need on that side. So we'll pick an example here.
Yeah.
Describe the characteristics of network topology architectures, task 1.2. Now, the idea here is we don't expect you to build network architectures or understand all of the differences between them and why one is better than another. The describe keyword simply says that you should be able to understand kind of what are the key characteristics. Maybe you'll see a network diagram and be asked, is this a bus topology?
Yeah.
Is this a hub and spoke topology, right? Describe is kind of telling you, you don't have to go super deep. Another one as an example is like compare TCP to UDP. 1.5 in this side, right? Comparing two things is a little more sophisticated than describing them. You need to be able to understand and say, okay, well, what's the difference between these two? You'll get a description, right? Is this TCP or is this UDP?
Exactly.
Right? How do they fit in? So take the time to understand which verb it is, and that'll help you understand how deep to go into your knowledge.
And I think when we step even deeper knowledge-wise, then we get into things like the configure tasks. And there's one on 1.6 where you get to configure and verify IPv4 addressing. So when we talk about configure here, clearly you're configuring it on a device. That could be a laptop, a PC, but it could also be a router in this case as well. So that's what we're talking about here, configure. The other one that jumps out when I'm looking at that list is the verification one. So there's 1.10 that talks about verifying IP address or verifying IP address or parameters. So where do you go, right? How do you find that information on a device?
Network fundamentals kind of is our starting journey into the CCNA certification and the fundamentals that are there. Take the time, go through those elements. If you've got questions on a particular domain, check out the Learning Network. We've got community forums where experts like Patrick, myself, or other students like you are helping each other understand all the elements that are in there. So Network Fundamentals is your place in Domain 1 to really dive into your journey as a network engineer.
And you should also check out our CCNA prep program, shameless plug. So the CLN program has a really cool CCNA prep program where we've got videos, we've got Q&A, like questions, PDFs where you've got questions to test your knowledge, labs as well. So do check that out to practice your different skills for your CCNA exam.
Absolutely. All right. Well, thank you for joining us for this discussion on Domain 1 Network Fundamentals for the CCNA. We'll see you in another video where we dive into all of the other domains that are out there.